Everybody, welcome back to another One Piece chapter review today. We are getting more Brook lore. It is absolutely amazing. I couldn't be happier. And Oda, you are a sick man, okay? You are a sick man. You are doing this to us. You are giving us Brook's proper origin story in the manga, and you are hyping this up to give us this heartfelt chapter, and you're going to absolutely rip our hearts out in the end of this flashback because we know how it all goes down, okay? We don't have all the pieces, but we have enough of the pieces to put together exactly what happened in Esperia all those decades ago, all right? So let's break it down. One Piece chapter 1184, Only Bones Get Left Behind, all right? That is a line we'll be seeing a lot in this chapter, all right? But before we begin, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe on this video. I'm a small new channel, and any help goes a long way against the algorithm, but let's get into it. All right, and so the cover page is a very funny but also disturbing one, given the implications that we know, is Brook basically swimming around with a flotation device being struck by a bunch of different jellyfish. And first off, jellyfish stings aren't electric based, they're basically poisons, and these jellyfish stings can, in real world, can kill numerous fish, and they can do massive damage to just regular humans. So yes, jellyfish are very deadly. Don't assume that they're, oh, cute and cuddly. No. They can do massive damage to you, okay? But these jellyfish are very different, okay? They have emu's eyes. Yes, the same kind of Rinnegan shape pattern, whatever, including their blobus-like forms. So this is, Oda, you are a devious man, because we know eventually Emu is going to roll his head in Esperia and it's going to all go to shit, okay? And you're just building this up. You're just throwing it in our faces now. And this reminds me of like when Oda was talking about the One Piece and introducing in his office, there was like a silhouette or plushie of Emu just laying around in his office. So we'll see what happens from here on out. But yeah, this is just Oda basically saying, yep, here it is. Brook's gonna get involved because Brook remembers the God's Knights. He knows who they are. So this is it, all right? And so the chapter continues as we cut forward 7 years from when we left off, okay? So remember, the flashback started when Brook was 20. It's 7 years later, okay? So 70 years ago. So now we're 63 years in the past, okay? And so this essentially is 63 years ago in the Esperia Kingdom proper, okay? And now, Princess Shuri has now turned 14 years old, okay? And remember, she was being trained by Brook. She was being trained by her mother and the other members of the battle convoy of the Esperia Kingdom. And so she's been getting stronger. And not only has she gotten stronger, she's matured out of her awkward little girl phase with the runny nose into a young girl here who at 14 years old. And not only has she grown stronger, but she's also been renowned for her beauty. And rumors were just spreading across the entire West Blue about this beautiful woman this beautiful girl from the Esperia Kingdom, who's also strong, love of music, and she's beginning to get all kinds of suitors. And all of these men are just getting absolutely beat down by this girl because, remember, she's been training her whole life with a sword. She has no interest in these princes, and she beats them all, and one immediately just yields to her and just an absolute beat down. He's just like, I yield, I lead, I quit. And we see exactly how this goes on because, remember, she was being raised up by Brook. She had a huge crush on Brook, and she still does. And she says, you're all too weak, and the princes immediately cower and beg for her forgiveness, okay? And she makes it very clear in this chapter. She says, I have no interest in weak men, all right? And I definitely don't have any interest in men with no interest or talent for music, okay? And they're all stunned, like, wait, music, really? And then we cut away to Brook. And I gotta say, I love Brook's design in this flashback because he seems so wholesome, he seems so joyful. And listen, he was happy and joyful in the Roomba Pirates days, but it's different to see him now since he doesn't have the scar that he has when he was alive and still has as a skeleton. So Brook is eventually going to get scarred across his face, and he wears shades his entire life from this point onward, okay? Brook always wears shades. From this point onward until he becomes a skeleton, obviously, he's always wearing shades. In fact, sometimes when he's a skeleton, he still wears shades. And so Brook's walking with Princess Shuri, hand in hand. He's 27 years old. He's commander of the Esperia Guard Corps, okay? And then he heard, hey, Princess Shuri, I heard you beat up all those suitors again. And she's like, yep, you like strong women, don't you, Brook? And, you know, she's 14 years old. She still has her puppy girl phase. But yes, she still has a massive crush on Brook. And she's like, don't you think I've grown stronger? And he's like, no, don't you think I've grown stronger, Brook? And she's like, also, don't you think I'm also cuter? And Brook's like, yeah, you have gone adorable. I'll give you that. And she says, and I bet in the future, one day my breasts will get so big, they'll go so voluptuous, they will pop right out, like the sound effect. And I'm sorry, but this is just... Oda is a devious man. He's got a very perverted sense of humor. He once made a comment in SBS that he would sure love if all the women of Wano's kimono's chest would just burst open. So this is Oda just being him. This is a man who has a bunch of Nami figurines safed away in a safe somewhere. So he's just being his devious self as always. And Brook immediately tells her, well, stop, hold on, stop that. That's very unladylike, Princess Shuri. You shouldn't be saying that. And then Princess Shuri's like, what's with you? You sound like my dad. Now, this is very funny because Brook is a massive pervert, and he's being mature. He's being eloquent, respectful, trying to tell Princess Shuri, you shouldn't be talking about how big your breasts will be. And then he immediately turns around and sees a beautiful woman and is like, oh my God, you gorgeous babe. Can I please see your panties? And Brook is just gooning like he always does. Just gooning, because that's who Brook is. He's the gooner. If the Straw Hats, well, Sanji's the real gooner. He's the panty gooner. And then in a hilarious turnaround, Princess Shuri immediately just chucks her sword at him and tells him to stop it in a jealous fit, okay? She immediately tells him to stop it in a jealous fit, all right? And then we follow up. We see them. We then see the two of them, Brook and Gunko, sitting down in the royal palace, and Brook singing a song. From frogs to castle, from kings to chattel, of the dead you'll find only bones left behind. And so title drop right there referencing the title chapter, Only Bones Left Behind. And we see Brook basically singing these lyrics with Princess Shuri, and they're both laughing and smiling. And this is something Oda does. He introduces us to these characters, and then we find out their backstory. And then he shows us the parts where everything is joyful and happy. It's peaceful. It's loving, and then immediately the tone shifts and it all goes south. So Oda is basically building Brook's life in the Esperia Kingdom up, and then it eventually will come crumbling down the moment Imu, the Gods, Knights, the Gora say rear their ugly heads, okay? And so we see Brook laughing with Princess Shuri, and then she's like, yo, Brook, your music is funny, man. I really love it. And Gunko, even in her possessed state, still loves Brook's music in the present story. So take that for what you will. And then Brook responds, yeah, your dad, the king, his majesty, said the exact same thing to me many years ago. And then Shuri's like, man, you really love my dad, don't you? And my mom, too. And Brook's like, yep. He's like, he's my benefactor. Brook admitted this to Gunko in the current story. King Ruvan was his benefactor, his protector, okay? If I hadn't crossed paths with your father, Shuri, only bones would be left behind, which is very funny and ironic given the fact that Brook is basically a pile of bones right now in the story, okay? This is all he is. And so we see him basically smile and reminisce, and we go flashback within a flashback. Yes, it's Inception. We're 2 times flashback, okay? We're cutting back to now 16 years before this chapter. So this was essentially would have been 9 years before the start of this flashback. This would have been 79 years ago, essentially, okay? 79 years ago, that would have been around the same age as, I think, when, I believe, Sengoku was born. So this is the same year Sengoku was born, or 79 years. No, Roger was executed. Roger would be 70. This is basically around the same time Roger, Garp, Whitebeard, and Rox were all born. So 79 years ago. And then we see a little Brook. Now, we've seen images of the Straw Hats as children, and the only one we didn't see as a child growing up was Brook, and we saw him, and it looked like he was basically disheveled growing up in a junkyard, and we'll be seeing this again too. Brook's basically a poor child, and he's seeing these kids going to this fancy boarding music school. Because remember, Esperia is the land of music. And so then he basically sees, man, they're training with real instruments. This is amazing. I wish I could do this. And then they sound so good. Brook is just envious of their situation. And then you immediately hear somebody shout saying, hey, get out of here, kid. And then Brook immediately runs away. And then he gets called a filthy street rat, like from Aladdin. And they know he peeps around the school because he wants to go to a big music school and become a properly trained musician. And Brook apologizes, like, I'm sorry, please forgive me. And they say, scram, okay? The school, you're making the other students nervous. You're not welcome here, okay? And then you have the other people and the citizens basically say, ew, that kid smells nasty. Yeah, he's a stain on our country. And then we cut away to the junkyard, okay? I want people to remember this. Do you remember during the post-war arc flashback with Ace, Sabo, and Luffy in Great Terminal in the Goa Kingdom, how essentially the Goa Kingdom would basically dump all of their trash in one area, and all the common people would live in that area, and it essentially became the Great Terminal, and it basically was surrounded by trash heap and everything, and the people there essentially were just living in the dregs of society. Well, here in the West Blue and the Esperia Kingdom, this is no different. This is the same tactic, okay? Same exact situation. And remember, in that flashback, the nobles were concerned about the celestial dragons coming to visit them, so they decided, oh, we need to remove the stain on our country. So they basically set fire to all of Great Terminal and basically burned everything down and burned people's homes, houses, and just everything people had. And this basically just ruined their entire lives, okay? And nearly killed both Ace and Luffy in the fire, okay? And so this is a similar situation that we see. People will essentially try to shove their problems aside and not really deal with it. We see it a lot in the One Piece lore. We see it in Dressrosa with Olfactory and the toys. And even Luffy was like, man, this reminds me a lot of my homeland. And so Brooks, even though Brooks poor, he's in a junkyard, he's not letting him get this down. He is not letting him be like, no, this isn't my, get me down. And he sings probably one of the worst song lyrics I've ever heard. He says, the night's bad, it's the king's bad, and he's just going on. And then he has this line where he says, my mommy, my daddy, my little bro, with empty bellies rumbling, they had no food to chew. So this essentially is Brook saying he had a mom, he had a dad, he even had a little brother, but they all died from starvation or just growing up in this shithole that is the junkyard. And so Brook's just singing and dancing, all right? It's the king's bad. Yeah, it's the king's bad. And he's essentially writing a diss track, roasting the king of Esperia. And then we see future king, Prince Ruvan appear, all right? And Prince Ruvan, I'm sorry I didn't realize it sooner. This man is basically Beethoven. His hairstyle is literally just Beethoven. Like he's Ludwig von Beethoven, okay, who was another famous musician. Oda is clearly drawing inspiration from real world elements, so this is who he is. And so Ruvan essentially walks up to Brook and he says, "Did you write those lyrics yourself?" He's like, and he's also like, "What is that thing you're holding in your arms? What is that?" And then Brook's like, "Oh, it's my violin." And he says, "Well, it's supposed to be anyway, because Brook is poor. He can't afford any fancy musicians or new equipment or even used equipment. So he basically got together a bottle with some strings, tied together some tuners, and he basically used a stick and a string to basically make a makeshift violin, which you know that 100% that thing sounds god-awful to listen to, okay? So bad song lyrics, shitty music, instruments. I don't care how talented you are as a musician, you can only get so far, okay? And so we see Brook. And Brook says, I made out of glass bottle with some wires. It sounds good, right? And he says, it does have a freeing vibe to it. And then Brook's like, oh, wait, I've seen you before. Are you a fan of my music, mister? Because the king, apparently, future king, Ruvan, has essentially been visiting Brook his entire time here. He's been visiting him. He's like, okay, what's this kid doing? Why is he singing and dancing in this junkyard? And Ruvan just laughs. He's like, you could say that. You could say I'm a fan of yours. Okay, kid, I like the cut of your jib. And then he says, Mr. And then Brook calls him Mr. And Ruvan corrects says, hey, I'm only 21 years old. And Ruvan is clearly going to be one of those One Piece characters that has an older face. You saw this with Odin. He was like 18. He had the same face he did when he was like 40 when he died. Okay, some characters are just wired like this. All right. And Brook's like, what? Say what? You've got an old face? Man, you must have lived a very hard life. And Ruvan is just like, man, that is odd laughter. I've never met anybody like you, kid. And Brook just says, yo, you're right. Well, I suppose I can just call you Big Bro. And so this is the start of their friendship, because Brook was calling him Big Bro in the last chapter, and he was addressing the king in a very familiar manner. So yes, Brook is very tight with the king, or future king at this point, Prince Ruvan. And Brook says, you know what? Since we're boys, since you're my bro, I'm going to hook you up. I'm going to treat you to a nice meal, okay? I caught some grasshoppers and some frogs today. And I made you some grasshoppers and frog stew. And Brook says it's the secret ingredient is curry powder. All right. Brook admits that he steals it from a Navy ship. And because of the curry powder, it essentially makes anything taste delicious. And then Brook also comments, wait, that's not a good thing. I shouldn't be blabbing about that. And so when I first saw this, I was like, wait, curry powder that makes everything taste good? I hope to God this isn't Brook's not taking any drugs, because this sounds like drugs. Curry powder. He basically just sprays it on. It tastes anything good. I hope this isn't like some kind of One Piece version of crack, because Brook might be a crack addict for all we know. I mean, I hope to God not. It sounds like he's on that sauce. And Brook's just like, this tastes really good. It makes everything taste better. And we see this play out. And then King Ruvan looks at the grasshopper and frog stew. It just looks bad. Like, objectively, it looks awful. And then Ruvan looks down. And he's just like, he remembers his time in the Esperia kingdom's, upper 1% echelon. Okay, he remembers all the rich, fancy food that he's been eating. And then he says, he remembers, man, he remember being a sort of fancy soup that include features from fresh catch from the Ural Peninsula, all right? This is basically eating at a 5-star Michelin star restaurant, which, tangent, 5-star Michelin stars are a ripoff. They were created by the Michelin tire company to get people to drive out to certain restaurants. So if you ever wondered about that, it's like a total sham, if you ask me, but that's neither here nor there. And then he also eats some other food that's wrapped in very fine red wine, followed by prime A6 grade rubbery beef. Essentially, this man has not silver spoon, the golden spoon in his mouth. All right, he is eating the premium food in the One Piece world. All right, Sanji would be, I don't know what Sanji would say about this food, but he'd be like, yeah, this is top chef food. All right. And then he also remembers being introduced to the most beautiful women in the area. He's like, Your Highness, this young lady is the Saffron conglomerate, all right? She graduated valedictorian in the Anoa Academy. Essentially, they're trying to arrange for him an advantageous royal marriage to increase the kingdom's coffers. He's playing the politic game, and King Ruvan essentially has only known the best of life. He hasn't had a hard life at all, really. And so Brook's words are like, man, your face looks pretty old. You must have had a really rough life. And he remembers, he's like, I'm the prince of this kingdom. I eat 5-star food. I have the most beautiful woman in the world being introduced to me, asking for my hand in marriage. And this kid out here is living out in the literal junkyard with trash for food and clothing and instruments. And he's offering me a home-cooked meal. And King Ruvan is just like, he didn't know any of this. He was completely oblivious to this. Remember, the kingdoms of One Piece had this habit of just taking anything they don't like and just shoving it aside. And then King Ruvan begins to get emotional, and he's just like, oh man, this is so unbelievable. I can't believe this is real. And then Brook asks him, he's like, are you all right? You're tearing up. And then he's just so moved because Brook embodies everything an Esperia kingdom should have. Someone who loves music, who lives life to the fullest, who doesn't let the tragedies of his life get him down. Remember, Brook was imprisoned at sea for years, decades, and he never once let it get him down. He was obviously traumatized, but he never let it get him down. And then King Ruvan, Prince Ruvan, you gotta try to get those names right, comes to the conclusion, I can't believe I'm still in Esperia. Remember, he's been living the 1%. He doesn't know any of this. All right. And then he just tries to brush off. He's like, I'm sorry, Brook. I'm sorry. I'm just a tad tired. All right. I'm still happy to have this though. And then he tastes the food and then he just gulps it down and it just is like, this is, what is this? And then he's like, Brook's like, yo, it's so good. It's got you convulsing. And all right, it's the greatest. All right, time to get back to singing. Later, big bro. And so King Ruvan tries his food, and it's just like the worst thing ever. It just like tastes like shit, and he's like, what the hell is this? And Brook's like, all right, hope you like the food. King Ruvan isn't an ungrateful man. He's not going to punch a gift horse in the mouth, so to speak. And so he just decides to go on his merry way. And then he's like, all right. And Brook's like, hey, don't worry about paying me back any money. All right. Don't fork over any cash. we're bros, all right? We've been through tough times, but we're friends now, okay? Don't worry about it. I always look out for my homies, okay? Brook is a real one from the jump. And then we cut away to basically a montage of Ruvan essentially leaving the royal court, the palace, to come down to the junkyard to hang out with Brook. He brings some fancy booze. I don't know why he's sharing booze with an 11-year-old kid, but he's doing it. They're fishing. They're catching an octopus. Ruvan is smoking a cigar, and Brook's got a brand new violin that he got for him. And it's just, and remember, we see Brook wearing shades, and so you see basically the image we saw of Brook when Oda first revealed all the Straw Hats as small children, at least the ones we didn't know. That included Brook, and he's just singing with the violin, and he's just dancing, and this is the start of their beautiful relationship. Remember, Ruvan is going to become Brook's benefactor to the point where Brook is so infuriated when he sees Gunko and remembers that she's Shuri. He's like, no, I hope that I never see you again for what you did. You murdered my benefactor, and we're seeing this bond being forged. And Oda, you are a sick man. You are a sick man. You are doing this to purposefully make us feel happy for Brook, introduce us to King Ruvan, make us love him, make us love Esperia, and in a second, you're going to just rip it all away and make us just absolutely cry. Oda, you're a sick man, okay? You perverted jokes aside, you are a sick man. You torture your audience with tears, all right? You kill moms off. You kill off civil. You're just a sick man, Oda. You're a sick man. I'm on to you, okay? I know what you're doing, okay? You're sick. And then you basically just see, we cut away to a few days later, a few weeks later, at the Sicilio port, all right, in the kingdom, all right, and it's a marine ship, and they're basically telling them to load the instruments onto the cargo ship and handle them with care. And remember, this is the West Blue, so when I first saw the instruments onto the cargo ship, I'm like, is this a euphemism for something? And then we cut away to see Brook just absolutely demolished. He's been tied up and beaten to a bloody pulp at this point. Legitimately, he's been beaten almost to death. And Brook is just like, I don't know anything. It's a mistake, okay? And Brook just, it's a mistake. I don't know what you're talking about. And then we see a Marine soldier beating the shit out of a child, saying, cut the crap. I know you're the one who works as a smuggler for the Moron family. All right, those gangsters told you to drop off the powder, didn't they? And he's like, where did you hide it? And then Brook's like, wait, what are you talking about? And then he says, we paid our informant. The Marine goes on, we paid our informant good money, and they said you had the stuff. And so, are you ready to tell the truth now? And so we ain't talking about the normal curry powder here, all right? And then, so remember, we ain't talking about normal curry powder. Put a pin in that. And then Brook begins singing his song, okay? From cattle to king's chattel, only the dead, you only find bones. And then the Marine tells him to shut up, stop singing, you little shit, stop. And then Brook says, it might be only for a split second, but if I keep singing, I won't be as scared, okay? And the Marine comes to the conclusion, all right, this punk's seen our faces. Let's kill him and go after the gangster. And Brook continues to sing his song, of the dead you only find bones gets left behind. Okay, and so remember, ordinary curry powder. So the West Blue is basically crime central in the One Piece world. There are a lot of criminal organizations throughout the world, but we see the most prominent ones in the West Blue: Capone Beji, Don Marlin, and now the Moron family, essentially. And we see this normal curry powder. So from what I'm being told, essentially, Brook was basically just taking crack. Essentially, he was taking crack from these guys. He was basically pilfering crack from these guys, and he was using it to basically add it to his food to make it taste better. So Brook may or may not be a crack addict. Well, I don't know if he takes it right now, but he was on that sauce. Brook may have been on that sauce, okay? And so they basically just do it. And so then we see a double spread panel of the doors just bursts open. All right. Ruvan arrives and he shouts, Brook, I'm here to save you. And then he's just like panting, and then Brook's crying like, oh, big bro, you're here. Right. And then the Marines immediately shout, wait, it's Prince Ruvan. Oh no, this isn't good. Okay. And then Brook's like, wait, hold on. He's the prince? This isn't okay. Brook is just immediately, wait, hold on, wait. My bro's the prince? Oh, okay, this is not good. And then Ruvan immediately just goes straight over to Brook, and he is just like, oh man, I am so sorry, Brook. I didn't know this was gonna happen. I didn't want you to get hurt. All right, I rushed as soon as I could. All right, and then you basically says, and then you see the Ruvan arrive with the Esperia's battle convoy, and they basically tell him, Your Majesty, please fall back. We got this. We can't afford to take any kind of dangerous situations from happening. Remember, these are Marines, and Ruvan's like, I don't give a crap. All right, these men attacked my boy. They attacked my bro, Brook. No. I am not standing for this. And Ruvan has a pretty gangster line, all right? He says, effectively, if the government is going to shield scum like this, then our world is doomed. Isn't that right, Condell? And she says, I am nothing but your devoted steel, all right? I'll be there for you, all right? And then she says, and the Marines continue to fight back. We're the Marines, and then they just shit it. And then you see Ruvan and Queen Condell come in and just absolutely kick their asses, all right? And then, Brook sees these men fighting, and then they just say, oh, wow. Wait, so then as the fighting goes on, the Marines come to the conclusion, wait, hold on. So this kid wasn't the courier. He was just a kid who liked curry powder. And they realized they screwed up. They were the ones who screwed up badly, okay? And so the chapter just continues from there, and we see essentially what happens here, and it's just an absolute just travesty of what happens, because now we're seeing more of what happens here, because Brook's basically just still in a bloody state, and you see the courier has been confiscated. They've taken all of our illegal drugs and arrested their couriers. And so, yes, the Marines were in a corrupt deal with the Moran family, basically essentially smuggling goods and drugs into the Esperia kingdom. And this is absolutely hilarious, not hilarious, but also funny because Brook was taking drugs. He was on crack. Yes, Brook was taking crack. I'll say it. Brook was a drug addict. He was on drugs. Okay, and then you basically see Brook see the Ruvan and future Queen Condell basically fight, and Brook immediately is mesmerized, and he's like, "Man, he's a swordsman. That's so cool." And so this inspires Brook to begin learning the ways of the sword. This inspires him to become a swordsman proper in the story. Okay, we see this happen. And so then we just basically cut out from here, and we see Brook basically as just like, man, this is amazing. I never thought I'd see this. And the people of Esperia are like, oh man, they took down the gangsters. Lady Condell did it again. She saved our country. She's the best. Remember, she was the commander before Brook. She was the most famous person in the kingdom after Brook. Well, before Brook, actually. And then we cut away to the royal palace. And Brook has been stitched up, he's been patched up, and he's on his way. And then you see Condell telling him, Your Highness, I'm not angry with you, but in the future, please keep in mind the weight of your royal standing. And then he's like, yeah, I got it. Fine, whatever. I don't care about this. But who cares about royal standing, okay? And so Brook's like, hey, big bro, so you were the prince this whole time? And then Ruvan's like, listen, I'm sorry about this. I didn't mean to lie to you or deceive you, okay? You're my bro. I love you, but I had to do this, okay? And he's like, I was just having such a good time with you. I didn't want anything to ruin that because I was worried this would change our dynamic, that you would start calling me your highness instead of big bro. We wouldn't be close anymore. And then, and so Brook is like, he also tells him like, just please, for future reference, don't tell anybody that you swiped the curry powder. Don't tell anybody that you were the drug addict, okay? And you were taking drugs. And then before I continue, I want to bring up something about Queen Condell that I just brought up. When we see her full body, she has a very unique suffix, a dongs kind of sound effect. And literally only one person in the entire story has that suffix sound effects. It is Mihawk. And candle sounds like candle. Mihawk had a candle ship. I don't know. Is there a connection there that Oda's going for? I don't know how this will play out, but he's basically saying, yeah, Queen Condell is the only person outside of Mihawk who has that suffix. I don't know what the connection there is. I'm still partial to the Queen Condell is a god's knight sent to infiltrate the Esperia kingdom and just climb the ranks until she could get them in the fold. Maybe she had a change of heart, and then Emus and the Gorosei are like, nope, you're done. We're taking this back. I'm of that opinion. All right, and people are saying that she's a sleeper agent. I don't know, but that's neither here nor there. And then Queen Condell's like, man, Your Highness, every time you leave, it got us worrying. But so this is who you've been hanging out with. And then she's like, oh, I never would have guessed that you were spending your free time with such a cute little friend. And then she just lovingly taps him on the head. And then Brook immediately just goes gaga, like, oh my God, she's so amazing. I love her. And then he just bursts out with a bloody nose. And then she's like, well, sorry, I didn't know your wounds were that bad. And Brook's like, no, it's all good. Sorry, it's all good. Don't worry about it. All right. And then we cut away to the end of the chapter, all right? And Ruvan is just grinning ear to ear. He's just like, don't worry about this. This is going to be a bright new day. Okay. This is something amazing is going to happen. All right. This kid is now my favorite musician. Get him a room, get him a barracks, get him train him, give him a proper musical education. All right. From now on, I'm going to be his benefactor. I'm going to be his guy. I'm going to be the one to protect this guy his entire life. Okay. Because King Ruban, remember, is Brook's benefactor. He is the guy who Brook essentially spent his entire life trying to repay for the kindness that he gave him. And so then he basically kind of comes to further conclusions where he's just like, you know what? Don't worry about this. All right. This is going to be the best day ever. Okay. And then he says, from now on, I'm going to be your protector, kid. I'm going to give you everything. And then he just says, a new star is about to be born in the Esperia Kingdom. Brook, you're going to be the top guy here. Okay. You're going to be my man. All right. And then Brook is just like, wait, what? And then he says, I love this kid. All right. From now on, this place is going to be a lot more fun. And Brook is just like beginning to just bawl his eyes out. All right. At the end of what he's just heard. Okay. End of chapter, break next week. Okay. So that just got me just like, this is obviously going to end in heartbreak. This is obviously going to end in tragedy. We know Ruvan is going to get allegedly murdered by his daughter, Princess Shuri, most likely under the influence of Emu or the Gorosei. Esperia no longer exists. We don't know what happened with Queen Condell, but this isn't going to last. Okay, next chapter is probably going to be like the high water mark, and then it's going to be a slow decline before we just hit splat against it. Okay, and Brook is just crying his eyes out in bed. And so, listen, Oda, you're a sick man because now you're making me fall in love with this guy, King Ruvan, who is an amazing guy who cares about his people. He wants to help Brook. He wants to make Esperia great for everybody. And he is just he's gonna be murdered by his own daughter. Oda, you are sick. You're making us fall in love with these characters, and we know where their fates are. We know where they are in the current storyline. So that's that. All right, break next week. We'll see what happens. But anyway, I'm your boy Malik signing out. Take care. You have a wonderful day.